Good morning. I'd like to start by expressing my deep gratitude. Thank you to the Chautauqua family for opening up their home in such a warm and inviting way. Thank you all for deciding that it would be worthwhile for us to spend some time together this morning. And thank you to everyone in my life who at any point played a part in getting me to this stage today. I will try to do it justice. I'm coming to realize that speaking about Brazil is quite a daunting task. Tom Jobim, our composer, poet, and ambassador, knew what he was talking about when in the early 60s he said, "Brazil is not for beginners." Well, here's the catch. He was right, and I'm a beginner. So consider yourselves forewarned. What Tom Jobim might have been saying was that this is a difficult country to wrap your hands around. Too big, too diverse, too complex, too contradictory, and too beautiful, I might add, to describe in a short sentence or through a short talk. What I can and will do, however, is give you one perspective, as limited as any one perspective will ever be, about the untapped potential and missed opportunities characteristic of Brazil's most recent past. It's important that we begin to understand Brazil a bit more comprehensively, beyond beautiful beaches, a humble and compassionate people, the World Cup, Olympics, and at one point, rapidly growing GDP, the seventh largest in the world to be precise. Not because these things aren't important, oh, they are, but they're fragments of a greater and more revealing story, which I hope to convey as we continue on. Most of you know this, but for some in the room, this may come as a welcome refresh. Brazil is a very large country, larger, in fact, than all of Western Europe put together. Just 10% smaller than the United States. 5 hours and 15 minutes is the time it takes to fly from the northern tip to the extreme south. We share a border with 10 of our neighbors. 60% of our land is made up of the Amazon rainforest, home to more than 50% of all the world's species of plants and animals, responsible for 20% of the world's oxygen. Immense and Brazil are two words that go pretty well together. So 200 million people inhabit this expansive piece of the planet. And the most incredible thing is that if anyone can talk of a cultural melting pot, it's Brazil, no doubt about it. We are a microcosm of the world, as plural as it gets. We have Brazilians of Asian descent, thanks to an inflow of immigrants from places like China, Korea, and primarily Japan. So much so that Brazil has the second largest Japanese population in the world outside Japan. As a result of the religious persecution of the 1880s, hundreds of thousands of Lebanese immigrants came to Brazil, transforming it into the largest Arab colony in the world. Jews also made the trip over at about the same time, from North Africa and Eastern Europe, and later from Turkey and Greece, and then Germany. And in light of the hell beyond hell taking place in the Middle East at this very moment, I should pause here for a quick second to say that if there was ever a laboratory where Jews and Arabs live, work, and play in peace and harmony, then Brazil would be definitely it. The great continent of Africa has also blessed us with its rich mystic history, most visible in the northeastern state of Bahia, where I spend New Year's every single year. Europe has made its presence known with huge German, Dutch, Portuguese, and Italian colonies in the south and southeast. Even people of Scandinavian descent have been spotted in the countryside of the state of São Paulo. Now, when these people come together, as they have in Brazil, under one blue, yellow, and green flag everyone calls their own, you begin to understand why Brazil perspires joy of life, and why everyone who comes into contact with it develops such a strong and sacred connection. So that's the Brazil in our hearts, abundant, rich, colorful, and diverse. Now let me take you back to the week of November 14th, 2009. Something unprecedented and very encouraging happened. this. Most of you will remember this Economist cover, not least because of its witty design. This was, at the time, what appeared to be Brazil's coming out party. We had won the bids for the Olympics and the World Cup, inflation was under control, interest rates were coming down, unemployment was reaching its natural state, foreign direct investment, some of it fueling entrepreneurship and innovation, was pouring in like never before, and companies were going public. And hey, in that same year, at the heart of the global recession, Brazil grew 7.5% and became a middle-class country for the first time in its history. Even the skeptics, oh, just you wait. You don't know what's coming next. Even the skeptics had to admit that something was brewing. Could this be Brazil's turning point? Fast forward 4 years. We all woke up to another witty Economist cover, only that this time our national icon, Christ the Redeemer, was nosediving. Why? How? Where did we go wrong? I'm of the opinion, and I recognize that it is just that, an opinion, that we lost the plot, as Brits would say, because we failed to see the forest for the trees. Let me show you what I mean by this. I think everyone in the room would agree that education is the cornerstone for the development of any great nation. Education breeds cognitive development, citizenry, labor productivity, wealth, and prosperity. Brazil's performance in education, however, was in disarray when the first Economist cover was published, and very much still is, even throughout the 7 to 8 years of apparent positive momentum. To be explicit about it, about 20 million people in Brazil are still illiterate. PISA rankings that look at math, science, and literature put us 55th behind Chile, Uruguay, Romania, and Thailand. UNESCO ranks us 88th in their rankings. Now, there are those who say we need to acknowledge that we've moved up 1 or 2 places in a ranking here or there, and we should. But what we should not do is evaluate our progress relative to mediocrity. And yes, relative to our potential as a nation and as a people. And if the 7th wealthiest country in the world is not one of the most educated, then I'm sorry, but there's something seriously wrong with the current operating system. The story with public health care isn't all that different. To give you an idea, about 15% of municipalities in Brazil don't have one healthcare professional available. In another 40% of them, the ratio of patients to doctors is 3,000 to 1. The 7th largest economy, mind you, yet not enough hospital beds. Life in Brazilian cities isn't easy either. Ask anyone from north to south. In fact, a Mexican think tank reports that of the 50 most violent cities in the world, 14 of them, sadly, are located in Brazil. When there is so much lacking, despair will always invariably take over. Couple all of this with poor mobility and the fact that we are still, in 2014, the 12th most unequal country in the world, and you can see why quality of life in Brazil is really up for debate, and why analysts should have been a bit more rigorous, not to say responsible, a few years back when the country seemed to be on the move. Now, I see some of you shaking your heads and saying, wait a sec, if the situation in education, in healthcare, in the cities, and mobility is so dire, then what are you doing hosting a World Cup? Well, there's nothing wrong with hosting a sports tournament. I'm very much in favor of it. The problem is that this World Cup costs more than the last 3 combined. The problem is that the business of football led FIFA and Brazil to agree on 12 host cities, more so than any other tournament, resulting in the construction of huge multi-million-dollar stadiums in cities that don't have sports representation at any level in any sports modality. Take the example of the stadium in the capital city of Brasilia, which cost $720 million to build and has a capacity of 70,000 people. Its city football team has a fan base of, guess, 700 fans. That's right, 700. Who's going to foot the bill over the estimated 1,000 years analysts predict it will take to make back the money spent? Us, the people, through high taxes, high ticket prices, but more importantly, foregone investments in things that actually change the prospects for a more promising life ahead. Now, from the perspective of business, and I speak now as a business owner, it's an uphill battle. This isn't a picture of me, but it very well could be, although I have a little more hair. Opening a business takes 4 months. Income taxes are very high. Labor codes are imbalanced, so this leads to inefficiencies through the difficulty of acquiring and dismissing talent. Tax codes are archaic and obscure. Interest rates are among the highest in the world, and the regulatory framework around business is weak, lacking credible enforcement mechanisms. And speaking of the law, it often appears that there isn't such a thing in Brazil. Corruption is both rampant and cultural, from politicians that love to binge into public funds to your regular Joe who will use connections, influence, power, and money to bypass civic requirements and obtain special privileges. All of this is a perfect storm for stalled innovation, stunted creativity, chronic myopia, and generalized mediocrity. So, what happens when you focus too much on economic indicators in detriment of social ones? After all, Brazil ranks top 10 in all things economic, yet only top 100 in all things social. Well, this is what happens. You fall flat on your face. You become exposed. Illusions dismantle themselves, and reality kicks in. It's hard, it hurts, but it's real. Our 7-1 annihilation by Germany a few weeks back in the World Cup was just a game. Fine. Sports is funny like that, you might say. It could have gone the other way, and the metaphor I'm about to offer perhaps wouldn't work anymore. But it didn't go the other way. We lost 7-1 to Germany on our home turf in the semifinals of a World Cup. That's what happened. And in light of this historic event, I think it's permissible to speculate on how such a travesty can help understand the moment we are living through today as a nation. For starters, way too much confidence, not enough preparation nor discipline. While the Germany team was isolated at a beach up north with statisticians working through real-time adversary game data, with players practicing yoga every day and training on the pitch incessantly, the Brazilian national team was enjoying occasional day offs, welcoming guests to the team's training facilities and feeding the media frenzy through one photo op after another. Brazilian leadership, similarly, didn't do its homework 7 to 8 years ago when a gateway for real progress emerged. Too much pomp and circumstance and hiding behind percentage points in magazine covers made them blind to the fundamentals of the country, all of which were crying so desperately for help. Secondly, too much showmanship, not enough results. Our team was breaking down into tears during the national anthem, even before kickoff. Now, we know Brazilians are very emotional. There's no question about that. In fact, I would never want us to not be that way. But when emotions cloud judgment, creating an illusion of a reality and distancing you from all that is in your best interest, when emotion renders you paralyzed to the point where you let your adversary score 5 goals in the span of 20 minutes, then you can pretty much say that emotion has the potential of being a disservice to you at some point. Host to the World Cups, upcoming host to the Olympics, home to Pope Francis's first papal visit, host to the Rio +20 environmental conference. On the surface, Brazil has become the world stage and it looks good. Beneath the surface, it has failed to channel all this love and attention to the places and the people that most need it. Now, what gets me up in the morning feeling alive and well is my belief that when you hit rock bottom, there's always a spring. I do not for 1 second believe that Brazil is a lost experiment. No way. Never. In fact, I know that falling down is what happens exactly before you get up. Granted, we took a pretty big hit. We're scrambling to pick up the pieces, and we've already made a serious course correction, even if we haven't realized it. You see, there are lessons to be learned here, and once we are able to absorb them, the pain will end and open space for all things better. As a Brazilian guru that I highly respect said Sunday in a globally broadcasted satsang for peace in the Middle East, quote, "Problems are entry points for transformation, for opportunities that will allow us to access our own denial and neglect so that we can free ourselves from them. I tell you today, Brazil will improve. Just watch." The best part about all this drama is that never before has it been clear that economics and social development must go hand in hand. Not only because it's necessary, but because this is the only way to project a country like Brazil into the future. Either we make sure the country's wealth is channeled to a just and transparent agenda, educating people, providing proper health care, or we don't have a future to speak of. Either we inject new blood into Brazilian leadership, or we will continue to be ruled by disconnected cronies on anesthesia, apathetic to the injustice they perpetuate. There's got to be a different way to do this. I guess the question is how. And while it's not so crystal clear to me, in 2006, together with a few former colleagues, I took a stab at it, inadvertently, unconsciously, or subconsciously, I should say. You see, I was 26 at the time and not quite sure what I was doing, but it felt right, and that was enough. I sold my car and together with some pocket change founded a company in São Paulo called Mandala, which in Sanskrit means magical circle of power, an allusion to the metaphorical center within each of us where we are able to reach our highest state of self-awareness. Mandala is an innovation consultancy that helps organizations of all shapes and sizes bridge the pursuit for profit with the pursuit for purpose, understood as all things that contribute to one's health and happiness. In short, we embrace conscious innovation, the type that necessarily improves people's lives. What we are trying to do is accelerate the shift in mental models, and perhaps even consciousness, in the marketplace, so that the people behind brands and businesses find it in them to want to do things differently and better, so that shareholder wealth does not lead to stakeholder demise. After all, there is a way to generate value without sacrificing values. We are currently 7 years old and have 7 offices. We are currently 7 years old and have 7 offices: Mexico City, New York, Berlin, Tokyo. And in Brazil, we're in Fortaleza, in the northeastern state of Ceará, Rio de Janeiro, and São Paulo, our global headquarters. We work with large corporations, family businesses, schools, universities, governments, NGOs, and startups to help them think up new business models, new products, new processes with everyone and everything in mind. Our work is based on systems thinking, multi-stakeholder dialogue, complexity theory, shared value, and a non-negotiable commitment to the human spirit. A few examples of our work, if I may. In 2010, Nike invited us to help them come up with a vision for the brand focused on Rio de Janeiro, the backdrop for the World Cup and upcoming Olympic Games. What would the brand stand for? How would it legitimize its entry into the Rio de Janeiro market? Why would it do it? After spending a few weeks in the city with community leaders, cultural producers, athletes, urban artists, DJs, and city hall folks, we observed that, in part due to recent pacification efforts in the often violent, low-income communities overlooking the city, people were beginning to leave their neighborhoods and venture into others for the first time in many years. With that came a spontaneous convergence of people and arts and music and sport. We felt Nike just needed to help accelerate that, bottom up, by bringing people together through sport in the name of something bigger. The vision we created soon translated into mapping out the city and plotting training facilities, skate ramps, surf houses, retail shops, tournaments, and long-distance runs so that all residents, young or old, rich or poor, could practice sports and just be together, as one should expect to see in any great city. Our feeling was that if Nike could demonstrate its service to the welfare of the city and its citizens, real empathy would come of it. Over time, that empathy would very naturally and openly translate into brand preference, brand loyalty, perhaps even sales, and with them, profit. Nike is doing well, but only because it is doing good. Everyone's winning. We also worked with General Motors for a few years, doing work on renewable fuels in Africa and the Middle East, positioning work around Chevrolet in Latin America, and our last mandate was a global study into the future of urban mobility. A project that took us to South Korea, Sweden, the UK, Germany, the US, and Brazil. A project where we spoke to city mayors, academics, consultants, professors, researchers, in hopes of learning how to begin shaping a world of mobility beyond motors in developing megacities with more than 10 million inhabitants, like São Paulo. Now, as you may know, in a city like São Paulo, or Mexico City, Kinshasa, or Jakarta, cars are synonymous with lacking infrastructure, pollution, traffic, and in some cases, debt and insecurity. Yes, these cities are becoming more consumerist, and people will want cars in the future for a variety of different reasons we all know. But as we think ahead, 10 years down the line, or even less perhaps, cars as the city's main protagonists is a picture I can't really see no matter how hard I look. So we took a systems view of mobility, looking at things like urban planning, infrastructure, new materials, public transport, new technologies, renewable fuels, and public and private partnerships. After months of research and traveling to conferences and seminars, we brought together at a company beach house we had in the northern coast of São Paulo an eclectic group of thinkers from around the world. An Egyptian transportation designer, a Dutch biomimicry expert, a British mediator of public and private partnerships in the European Union, the CEO of an NGO linked to public transport, a seasoned American automotive product planner, an American professor of urban regeneration, along with some other curious folks. For 10 days, we ran ideation workshops to connect all the information we had collected over the previous months. We left the beach with a suite of 32 innovation opportunities, most of which had nothing to do with cars. But the greatest legacy of this project was helping flip the switch, so that slowly but surely, GM could begin seeing itself in the future, not as General Motors, but as General Mobility. Again, if GM is able to demonstrate its service to society through mobility solutions aligned with future visions of how cities will and must be reconfigured, then it will perpetuate its existence, and with it, the wealth that comes from it. Profit and purpose in symbiosis coming from the exact same source. Here's a final and fun one. A couple of months back, we engaged the Los Angeles Lakers basketball player Kobe Bryant on what we call a rapid prototyping workshop, focused on combating child obesity and child inactivity in Brazil. Kobe, along with 11 professionals from different creative fields in Brazil, spent 96 hours at Facebook's headquarters in Silicon Valley, conceiving a platform that will get kids in Brazil to stay active and practice more sports. We prototyped the platform, created a mobile app, created a video, did all the market sizing and financial modeling in just 96 hours. How? By merging Kobe's inspiring story and incredible voice and reach with cutting-edge technology, creativity, innovation, and a very generous dose of purpose. As a result, we've created a self-sustaining social business that we hope will reverse the child obesity trend in Brazil and safeguard the future generations to come. A business that creates, shares, then multiplies value. Value that will help kids become more disciplined and motivated and healthier. Value that will lead to better performance in school, greater job opportunities, more integrated citizens, better mothers, better fathers. I'm talking about a vitalic spiral of prosperity that should orient everything we do all the time. At Mandala, we do what we do because we feel the future of business is social by essence. Soon enough, you won't need to isolate your well-intentioned efforts in a peripheral and often under-resourced department in hopes of offsetting bad karma with good karma, because your commercial activities will be by default beneficial to all. This shift is already happening all over the world, to a greater or lesser extent. Our purpose as a company is merely to accelerate it. In this new world, business is no longer about trade-offs, doing well or doing good. They are one and the same. In this new world, the notion of competition is neutralized by a sense that any well-intentioned company doing seriously good work will have its place in history. In this new world, people are understood as people, not just consumers. In this new world, the natural environment is not something out there, but something in here. Mother Earth, Pachamama, the hand that feeds and protects us from cradle to grave. As MIT professor Otto Scharmer explains, for all of this to happen, we really need to migrate from an individualized, ego-centric operating system that looks out only for oneself to a collective, collaborative, eco-centric mindset where one's well-being is necessarily a function of another's. You see, the ego, and you all well know this better than I do, the ego is built on attachments and aversions. This is right, and this is wrong. I like this, and I hate that. My point of view is valid if and only if yours is subsequently invalidated. We are hostage to this world of dualities as we pursue a false sense of security that is really only tearing us apart. I can't live like this. I don't think anyone wants to live like this, but not everyone realizes that there's an alternative. And while perhaps naive to say, I don't think this has as much to do with actually shifting behaviors as it does with just opening our eyes to a reality that is already present, manifesting itself before us in living colors every single day. All of us in the room, for example, have taken part in some discussion over the horror and the hatred seen in the Middle East over the last couple of weeks, not to say months, years, and decades. We talk about this because it matters to all of us, no matter how close or how far we are to the actual issues. Every time we see the grief of an Israeli or Palestinian mother, father, brother, sister, son, or daughter, something within us goes off. We don't know exactly what it is, but it probably has something to do with the invisible yet invincible umbilical cord that ties us all together in what Fritjof Capra calls the web of life. As we all begin coming to terms with the fact that hatred and aggression and intolerance are forces that transform yet destroy, setting us further apart from anything we can call social, sacred, or sustainable. I forgot who, but someone once told me that if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. While I have an issue with that rule, as it downplays intuition, I recognize that we live in a world of metrics, and that in order to function as a society, we need constant reassurances that we are moving in one direction or the other. Fine. So let me shed some light on metrics that I feel are important, courtesy of the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan, that for the past 50 years has been measuring its welfare in a more comprehensive and holistic fashion. Their gross domestic product, GDP, has been replaced with GNH, gross national happiness. Measured in terms of income distribution, pollution, noise, traffic, severe illnesses, usage of antidepressants, rise or decline of psychotherapy patients, jobless claims, lawsuits, divorce rates, crime rates, individual freedoms. Criteria that I think we would all agree are quite important. Now you can see how this can really change your assessment of a country. Take the US, the world's economic superpower. 10% of its population is on antidepressants, 20% on some psychiatric drug, and 70% on prescription medication. Do we really feel comfortable with this? I'd rather be poorer, less powerful, but healthier and happier, wouldn't you? And if you want to talk business metrics, we can too. Author and academic Raj Sisodia did some groundbreaking research and proved the following. Companies that are purpose-driven outperformed their Fortune 500 peers by over 1,600% over a 15-year time period between 1996 and 2011. So this idea that doing good pays off is no longer a hypothesis. It's now a science. So looking just at profit, GDP, sales, revenues, salaries, prices, inflation, share price, savings, interest rates will only tell you so much. There's a greater story unfolding, and it has to do with two very simple notions, our health and our happiness. Measure those, and we will have made a tremendous stride in this evolutionary passage through life. Now, I'd like to leave you with an African word that I have fallen in love with lately. Ubuntu loosely translates into I am because we are. I am a product of the people and the places that reside inside of me. We are extensions of each other, whether we are ready to accept it or not. And I'm grateful to have made that connection explicit with each and every one of you today. I would like to celebrate this connection in hopes that it becomes perennial by sharing a moment of inner silence with you all to the tunes of a beautiful mantra whose title is none other than We Are One. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.